G'day guys, how you all going? Hopefully you can hear me. So we're into round 2 of our live chats, and I see we got quite a few questions came in via email, things that people wanted me to crack into. So that'll be good, that'll get us going. There's a couple of things I want to go over as well, just to keep you guys up to speed with various things. So one of the first things I wanted to talk about was Burris rings. Now, if you go to the Citron website, for example, and you go through their scopes and then into their accessories area, what you will see there is the Burris rings, and they're the posi lock rings, I believe they're called. They've got the canted inserts. So those are a ball jointed plastic insert. Now they're an excellent scope for both canting. Excellent rings for canting your scope, but also they're just very good at not damaging the scope body itself. But what I do see is a lot of complaints from various people, gunsmiths and the likes, that don't think those rings are all that good. They worry about the rings losing their zero, the scope losing its zero and so forth over time. Now, I haven't had that problem, and I'm pretty hard on my gear. So what I want to do is just to go quickly over how I actually go about setting up those rings. So when I first mount the rings on a set of bases, the Burris rings have a cross bolt going through the bottom of the rings. So what you want to do is mount the ring on the rail or on your Weaver style bases, and then put the cross bolt in, and then push the ring to the front of the recess and the Weaver base. So that just ensures that under recoil, that scope's not going to go anywhere, because if you put it at the back, that's the wrong way. Physically, or regarding physics, the scope is always trying to shift forwards under recoil. So if you've got it positioned forwards to begin with, then it won't try and do that. You can put a little bit of Loctite on those cross bolts if you like, and then what you can do is just screw them up to about, let's say 30, 35 inch-pounds, something like that. And then you can mount your scope, and if you want to put some cant in, then use the appropriate plus and minus inserts to get that scope canted as you want it, get that positioned nicely. Put on your top straps, and then do each of those screws up to about 20 inch-pounds. That's usually enough. But what I wanted to say was, after you've done that, put the rifle aside overnight, and then come back the following morning and re-torque those cross bolts. And you can do the top screws as well. Now, if you do that, that will just ensure that you don't really have any of these problems with the rings coming loose over time. It's just that the way the ring's designed, there is a slot in the bottom of the ring, and that metal has to bend and conform to the Weaver base or the rail. So you really need to have that. That needs a bit of time to actually form. And so if you come back in the morning and you re-torque those screws up, then you won't have any problems with those rings. And you might, I think last time I checked my 308, it had been out in the field for about 2 years, and it had been seeing really harsh abuse. And when I went back to the range to check at zero, it was, I needed to come across 2 clicks and down 2 clicks, I think it was. And that's after a couple of years. And I'm talking really hard abuse, and also on the trips into the bush, bouncing around on the quad bike and so forth. So that's not bad for a couple of years. Other rifles, I haven't had to touch them at all for several years. So yeah, just some very simple tips in order to make those rings very, very reliable. I don't normally use Loctite on the top straps and the screws there, but if you want to, you can do that. But it's sort of neither here nor there with those. They do seem to hold themselves in place, but it's just a matter of giving it that time. All right, so another question here from Sweden, and that was the reader wanted to know a load for his 308 for moose. And he said that I speak often of heavy, slow, heavy, and soft bullets versus light and stout bullets. And then, of course, we can get a little bit confused because there's a whole lot of stuff in between. We've got the likes of the 165 grain interval and so forth. So what he was saying was that he'd started out with 150 grain SST, and he'd used that on roe and so forth, and he'd shot boar with it as well, and he had excellent results with it. And then he wanted to know what he would use for animals weighing, I think, about 300 to 600 kg in his local area. So that's a hell of a change in body weight. But, of course, it's been done before. What I wanted to do here was to actually just explain an anecdotal story. A colour came to me a little while ago, and he asked for 308 loads for head shooting and neck shooting feral cattle, big, heavy cattle beasts. And I said to him that although the ranges would be fairly close, sometimes you can very easily miss the brain. And he had been using just generic factory ammunition, store-bought ammunition, 180 grain type stuff. And it was going okay, but he had complaints. And so I said to him, well, how about, I gave him a couple of different ideas. One was the 200 grain ELDX, just simply because that's a heavy bullet, and it's got a relatively tough jacket. And if you happen to not hit the head or neck vertebrae quite square, the wound is actually quite large, so that those fragments will reach out and destroy those areas. But so that worked out really well, actually. He loaded that to about 2450, something like that, and he was extremely happy with that. It went really well. So I'm not saying that it's a heavy game load by any means, but for what he was asked to do, it was good. And then I said, actually, if you want to just experiment and play with this, you could run the 225 grain ELDM. You might have to pull the tips to make it fit in your magazine, and you could run that at about 2,300 feet per second, 2250, 23. Again, the ranges weren't long. And I said that's very, very slow, very heavy, and it will open up and create a very large wound. And that, again, if you're shooting on the fly and you don't get a chance to really place your shots that well, it will make the most of headshots. So he actually went away and did that, and I wasn't expecting him to actually go through with it. I put out all these crazy ideas, and then I leave it to the guys, and not many follow through. But in this case, he did. And he said it was so effective that he thought, this is with the head and neck shots, that he thought he would chance a body shot. And that also proved to be effective. And then he took a few body shots when he had to, and he had absolutely no problems with it whatsoever. So it just goes to show what you can actually do with the 308, but it comes down to how far you want to use it as well. I mean, with the 225 grain, especially when you pull the tip, the trajectory is quite steep. So you don't want to be using that past a couple of 100 yards if you're not in a position to actually take the time for those shots. And it is, once it reaches out a fair way, it is going quite slow. But the 200 grain ELDX, that can be quite useful as well. So these are cheaper options, of course. I mean, you could run a 200 grain partition, and that's the front's going to open up and shed weight. So that in that regard is very soft. But with the rear core, of course, it holds together, especially well at 308 velocities. And once you get into 300 Win Mag velocities, you can put it under a bit of pressure on very large animals. But in the 308, it can go quite well. So anyway, that's just a couple of things. I think there's another question here about 708. So Steph, have we got any pressing questions on the comments here?
Greg wants to know if the 180 ELDM would be any good out of a 7mm practical. He's got a buck antelope tag.
Buck, antelope tag. Which ELDM is it? The
180 grain.
Oh, Greg. Hey, Greg, how you going? How's life in Utah treating you? Yeah, for a buck antelope, you can use the 180 grain ELDM or the 162, but both would be perfect for that. So yeah, you go for it. Just load it about 10 thou or 15 thou. Just start with one of those two, and then go from there. So it should be exceptionally good. Yeah, I can't see any problems with that.
So leading on from that,
yeah,
then you've got Aaron Winter asking about the 162 ELDM and the 7mm08, just starting to work up loads, and what powder would be best to start with, and what length should I start at?
Okay, so Aaron, in a 20-inch 7mm08, there's not generally any advantage to the slower powders such as 2209 or 4350. You're better off to stick with that 2208 Varga burn rate, and you can load. So you say you can take up to 2950 OL, so you can load quite close to the lands, provided that the throat accommodates that. But often the maximum overall length is around about 75 millimeters, something like that. So usually you can get close to the lands and have a bit of bullet in the case as well. So unless there's something, unless the throat's well up at max or past max SAMI spec, then you should be able to get close. But 20 inches, so you'll probably be about 2600 to 2650. So what I suggest you do is to not chase velocity. So just going on from that, every now and then someone will come up with a 7mm08, and it's been in the field for a long time and the barrel's getting a bit worn, it's a bit of a dud, and they want to work up a load with a 162 grain. And I just get the feeling sometimes, just because of past experience, I suppose, that their barrel's on its way out. So what I do say to them is, even if you only get to 24 or 2450 is a normal sort of down load, that is still reminiscent of a 303 British load. It's still going to have that sort of belt to it, if you're familiar with that. It's going to hit hard. It's going to shoot a lot flatter still than 303. And it's going to have some real reach on it. So in those cases, I say to the guys, it's probably better to just focus on working with that 162 grain ELDM and developing a load, even if it's only 2450, because it will still hit a lot harder out to a lot longer ranges and with good penetration than a good number of these sort of 140, 150 grain bullets. So it's, in some ways, you're better off doing that until such time as you can afford to put a new barrel on the rifle and then experiment with whatever you want. But with that rifle of yours, if it does allow you to get close to the lands with the projectile, with the intersection of the boat tail and the bullet body, with the intersection of the case neck shoulder junction, then you do it, and then just work up with that 2208. I don't like to quote loads on the internet, or it's just so, it can be fraught with so many difficulties, because of course people's scales are different and cases are different, and the way people do things, there's just so much room for mistakes, and also overall lengths and so forth. But quite often, just as me personally loading, the sweet spot is around 41.5 grains of Varga or 2208 with a Hornady case and a Federal 210 primer, with that with any of those setting depths from 71mm through to 75mm. So, but anyway, you do want to start with your book loads. I mean, I'm just speaking about my own personal experience, and that velocity range is again about that 26 to 2650. So quite hard hitting. Yeah. Right. Got anything else there, Steph?
Just a quick question. Michael Everett was wanting to know about
Yeah.
cleaning reloading dies. do you clean them as soon as you receive them, and then how often do you clean them afterwards, and what do you use to clean them?
Oh, yeah. So especially on the lead eye, sometimes you'll find that they're absolutely loaded with a preservative oil, and you do want to get some of that oil out of there because it could interfere with things. So get the oil away from the areas where the case is going to be in contact with it, especially it's just the neck. That's what you're really most concerned about with that area there. And if it's a full-length dye, then you'll need to get it off the body so that you can use your resizing wax in that area. And then if it's in a dry area, it's a good environment, well, then you can have just a very minimal amount of oil on it. And with those lead neck dyes, you're not putting lube into them or anything, so they're pretty easy care dyes. But with other brands, if you're going to put them away for a period of time, then you do need to hop back in with something like CRC Long Life or fluid film, something like that, and just swab it around with a Q-tip. But then you've got to make sure that you get that back out again afterwards. So yeah, that is very important. So on that subject of reloading as well, someone asked me about using a full-length dye as a neck dye. The question, there's a lot around this question, and that is, how far down should you screw a full-length dye? So the man who asked me the question, he was saying that some experts or people say that you should back the dye off. If you want to use it as a neck dye, so you back the full-length dye off until it's not touching the shoulder, and then you can use it as a neck dye. And then someone else said that you should, or some others said you should turn the dye in until it just bumps the shoulder back, and then it's giving you a little bit of a shoulder bump. So he asked me which camp am I in, and I replied the whole thing's utter bullshit, because you can't really, well, not often can you actually use a full-length dye that way, because as the case goes into the dye, it elongates the case body well before it hits the shoulder. So the case is pushed in as it enters into the dye, and the case gets longer. So because the case gets longer, you've already distorted it well away from its fire-form chamber dimensions. So it's kind of a moot point to say that you're neck sizing. You're not neck sizing at all. And then by the time you actually get that, so if you were to then back that dye off a significant way, you take the brass, and first you put it into the rifle just to see how it fits, and you feel the bolt close, and you can actually feel a little bit of resistance on the bolt. That's your once fired brass, we'll say. And then you put that into your dye, which you've backed off, a couple of turns or something like this. You run it through the full-length dye, and then you chamber it back in the rifle, and hello, the bolt won't go down as easily as it did before, and that's because that case has been elongated. So then for these guys to say that you bring it back until you just bump the shoulder, well, I don't know what the hell they're talking about, because by the time you screw that dye in enough to bump that shoulder back, that case is heavily distorted, and the concentricity could be well gone depending on how good those dyes are. So it's not often that your dye is actually closely spec'd to your individual chamber. You don't know how it's going to go unless you have those custom designed for each other. Now, having said all of that, if you screw the die down to the shell holder, then you may be actually oversizing that brass altogether. You may be really overworking it. So when you set up a full-length sizing die for full-length sizing, yes, you should actually pay attention to how far down you're screwing that die. And you want to just be able to have that bolt just come down. Well, it depends on how you want to do it, really. You can have it so that you just get a very, very light bit of resistance on that bolt, and that that you're not, you haven't increased head space. You haven't caused a situation where your cases are going to split at the base. You can take it a little bit further if you want, just to, especially if you've been through a round of neck sizing for a while and those cases are oversized and you want to get them back again. Well, then sure, bring them back a bit, but you don't want to bring them back so far that the bolt's just falling down and you haven't really paid attention to how much sizing has actually gone on, because for all you know, that could be a maximum SAMI chamber, minimum dies. So just it's common sense, just use your common sense for those things and you can work your way through it. Yeah. All right, Steph, what else we got there?
Sean Ellis is wondering if you have any thoughts on the 6.5 PRC. He's got unusual rifles and thinks it looks like a good caliber.
It depends on what you're hunting. We talked about the PRC in the last stream, and we went over that in quite a bit of detail. But yeah, there is a little bit of a hype to that. These cartridges, they'll keep becoming popular because guys don't know how to shoot anymore. They can't handle the recoil. And one of the reasons they can't handle the recoil is because the rifles are being made smaller, they're more flimsy. So that's not on the guys. That's on the manufacturers who are telling you that you need a lighter rifle. And then there's the guys who are struggling to actually shoot because the technique is then not optimal to handle those cartridges. So the cartridges just keep getting smaller and smaller in accordance with that. So, we had the 270 Winchester for decades, and all of a sudden we have pretty much the same bullet weight, same velocity, and we're supposed to think that this is something great and new, and well, it's not. It's not really. I mean, it does have good merit as a long-range cartridge, but once it gets out to those ranges, it doesn't have a huge amount of energy, and it doesn't have a huge amount of energy or weight. Weight is the big problem for larger animals at closer ranges. So if you're hunting lighter body deer, the lighter species of whitetail, blacktail, seeker fallow, this sort of thing, pronghorn, then sure. But you got to know what you're getting into, and you don't want to push it past the point where it actually fails to have sufficient energy to cause expansion of its own projectiles as a result of its lower bullet weights. And I think also with that, when you're at that 140 grain, sort of 147 grain weight, you do have to pick the right projectile for the job. And I've gone over that in the knowledge base. Some people listen, some don't. The ones that listen, they come back and say, oh, that was great. I understand now what you're saying. I used the nozzle partition for this bushwork, and then I went to the ELDM or AMAX, or as it was called before, for long range work, and the whole thing came together. And thank you, that all worked out. I get what you're saying now. Others, they just want the one answer fits all, and that's not really the cartridge for it. I mean, it can be done, and guys will brag for a while, but it wears thin. It really does. Yeah. All right, what do we got next?
Okay. If you have a non-bedded stock, do you push the action forwards or backwards when torquing the screws?
Back, and that's a good question. So with the scope, you push the scope forwards. With the action, you push it back. And on the Ruger American in particular, assemble that with the rifle in an upright position, and that will just make sure that that's sitting at the rear of its V block, because that's an action you can't easily bed. Or if you do see people bedding it, you want to run like hell the other way. But just that's a simple way to address that rifle. Yeah, good question.
Okay, so a 357 Magnum carbine
Mm-hmm.
for bush stalking red deer, shots inside 100 yards. Do you reckon it'll be okay? And what ammo would you use?
It'll be on its limit. Yeah, you've got to use a 180 grain bullet, unless you're going to use some kind of homogeneous copper bullet and drive that as fast as you can. But for reds, yeah. So during the 90s, all those Rossi rifles came to New Zealand, and it was just a huge thing. We just had truckloads of these Rossi rifles tune up here. And for a time, I think the 357 really was outselling the 44. And a lot of guys were running 125 grain, and they do hit really hard and they open up really fast. But then people started losing deer because it was all right for goats and little stuff and fallow and that sort of carry on. But on the red deer, they started to run. So that was a big mistake for a lot of those guys. But anyway, 180 grain bullet will do it. But what you want to do is you want to use a chronograph. You want to use H110 powder. You want to load it as fast as that sucker will give you. And you want to, you keep inside 100 yards, as you say. And you want to get it quite a bit of practice too. So you see a lot of guys, they set up at 25 and then they finish maybe at 50 yards and they really don't take it any further. With that cartridge, you want to actually do some practice at 100 and try and keep those shots inside 3 inches so that you know where that bullet is going, It does help if you have, for bush hunting, Reds, it does help if you have a scope. And I think, there's a Leopold Freedom scope. Not a lot of guys put red dots and all this crap on their rifles. They think they're the shit. Leopold have got a Freedom. It's a VX1, cheap model, but it's got a tri-MOA reticle in it. Have a play with that on top of a Marlin rifle, and you can really place your shots nicely with it out to 100 yards or so. But yeah, ideally you'd be running the 180 grain XTP as fast as you can push it, so 1800 feet per second, something like that. And keep your shots well forwards. It won't exit the animal, okay? So you're not going to get a blood trail, and you won't get a blood trail from the entrance side unless it's a close range shot under 50 where there's a lot of energy. Then you might get a bit of blowback, and then you'll get that a bit of a blood trail. But it is on the light side, so you play with it, use it, but just be mindful of its limitations and just spend that time at the range with that particular rifle. It'd be interesting to know what breed of rifle you were looking at. But anyway, yeah. Okay, what do we got? What else we got?
300 Win Mag with 165 grain Accupond. Do you have a suggested powder of choice?
I really go either way with that. If it's a 24, use H4813 shortcut, which is 2213 shortcut ADI. If you're running a 26-inch barrel, you can use 2217, which is H1000. But you can also run that in a 24-inch barrel if you want to. So, and just take your time working up your loads for that. Just really experiment right through the velocity spectrum to see what it's actually able to give you. You'll find that bullet, it cleaves to some of its energy if it's used on very light animals, and it also cleaves to its energy at very long ranges. Its bonding works against it. So there's a sort of a window where it works really well. For instance, red deer out to 400 yards, something like that. It sort of all comes together at that point. Tar out to, say, 400 yards, it works really well for that. And then if you push it way too far, then it'll fail to expand. If you use it on way too big of an animal, it will overexpand. If you use it on too small an animal, even at close ranges, it will expand, but the energy, you won't get that wow factor that you were hoping to get from that cartridge. So, and I've gone over all that in the book series, the cartridges book. So just pay attention to that and don't skip to the cartridge section. Make sure that you study the fundamental section. That's very important. Yeah, cool. All right, what else we got there?
Do you want to stick with some reloading questions, or do you want to change your pace?
I don't really mind. Just whatever the guys need to know, that's what we'll get stuck into.
So we've got Fritz interested in accurizing a Remington Sendero 300 Win Mag.
Mm-hmm.
Wanting to know what are the most important improvements that can really benefit the platform.
All right. Yeah, you can give the lugs a light lap. They're often not too bad, not compared to some others. But, I mean, the best thing you can do is bed the rifle and then focus on how you break that bore and how that process. And I've gone over that in the book series. Recroning the muzzle, yeah. I mean, there was an experiment a while ago where these guys took a piece of Rio, rebar, and they chambered it, they barreled it, drilled it, rifled it, chambered it, and then they cut these horrible bloody muzzle contours on it, and it's sometimes a little less than you think. So with the Sendero, I know, look, guys just chase all sorts of bullshit variables, and they got these bubble levels and crap all over these rifles, and they think all this stuff makes a damn difference. It doesn't. And we went over that in that Is It Me, Is It My Rifle video. That's on YouTube. It's not that long. And I just really wanted to go to express the importance of sticking with the basics. So it was good shooting technique, good sound, basic hand loads. Concentricity was the key. Now, I was a bit cheeky with that one because I jumped in higher than you would normally jump in, because I had a good handle on that chamber. I knew where it was at. I kind of knew what I was in for. But yeah, good basic hand loads, working it right up through the velocity spectrum. You've got to think a bit outside of the book, outside of the box. And also, yeah, the bedding. But you don't have to bed straight away. You can start doing some preliminary tests and focus on getting that. You can do your lugs and get your trigger right. The trigger's the big one. Don't put money into putting a freaking muzzle brake and all this crap on them, but leaving the trigger done. Do the damn trigger first, and then when you've got funds later on, you can do all that other junk. So trigger, you can do your lugs. You don't have to be just yet. Just wait. Just give it a bit of a test run, and then focus on breaking that bore in a meaningful way, not just some way that someone's told you because that's how some other arsehole's done it for the last 100 years. Actually think about what you're doing. So that's in the accurizing book. And yeah, if you can then work on your technique, because that's where most people end up failing. That's the end bit. They just give it a big man hug and hope it'll shoot straight. Well, it's not going to work. So yeah, they're a good rifle. That's the thing. You've got a good platform to start with. So you got to start with have a little bit of faith that it might have the potential, and that rather than just adding things to it, you need to strip away your own ignorance towards what it might actually be capable of, and just focus on what you can bring to the table via your reloads, via your shooting methods, and give it a chance. So yeah, and there's another video for that on our video learning channel, and that's called Troubleshooting the M700. That's a great video. And in that video, we worked on a Remington SPS. So it's a slightly different barrel. It's button rifle. It's not hammer forged, and it probably hasn't had quite the same attention that the Sendero has. But that was shooting all over an A4 when we started, and when we were finished, it was still shooting into one hole. So, and it's just straightforward stuff. So yeah, it's a good rifle. Just keep at it, and just stick to really basic variables, and always think about, am I adding shit to this, or am I stripping away? It's often the process is better if you're just letting all the crap go. Yeah. So hopefully that helps you out a bit. Yeah. All right.
So we've got Mark Palmer in a 223 stag arms. He's wanting to know, for light medium game at 400 yards, should he look at the 73 grain ELDM?
That's all right. I can see that question. Sorry. No. All right. Don't use a 55 grain TSX past 120 yards. All right. Don't do it. It's unethical. That's the end of it. That's it. There's no more to that question. Yeah. If you want to shoot past that range, then go with the heavies, like as you've mentioned. Yeah. Other, just don't do that. Yeah.
Well, that was easy.
Yeah. What else have we got?
So if you go straight underneath that,
for bore,
monolithic copper bullets for bore.
For bore ammo, a bit of a fast and light copper bullet, or traditional heavy or slow. It depends on the range. And then above example, after it hit 120 yards, it doesn't have the energy to either generate a large wound via hydraulic force, and it doesn't have the capacity to generate a large wound via mechanical action. So it's screwed either way. It just doesn't have what it takes. So it's the same with your bore question. The the further you want to shoot, of course, the less energy a bullet has, and so the less it's actually able to open up. So yeah, I've gone over that in the article. Copper bullets can be inhumane, and I've also gone over that. Well, there's a video for that on YouTube at the moment. That's just a goat, of course, but it's the same deal. If you're hunting in close and forested areas and you want to use a Barnes bullet or something like that, then yeah, sure, go for it. Drive it fast. But otherwise, yeah, sometimes it's just, you're just better off going heavy and slow. Yeah, it's just, there's no other way around it. Yeah. Okay, what else we got there?
Sorry. Okay, how fast is too fast with the 180 grain ELDM for close shots? Big New Zealand game.
Taking a bull turret 20 metres. How fast is too fast? Generally, with that type of bullet, once you get over 3,150, it starts to. You can sometimes have problems with certain bullets of that type of design. Actually, the SST as well. So, yeah, I mean, they will normally, even as a fully fragmented cluster, you'll still get that that wound. You still get the penetration, but you won't get that hydrostatic shock effect. So there's not really a nervous effect. But just every now and then, if you go past that 3,150 and your animal weight goes up too high, then yeah, you might just occasionally have a situation where it's stuck on an onside ball joint or something like that. This is not just with the 7mm, with other cartridges as well. So that's something you do have to be careful of once in a while. But no, I think for what you're talking about, you'll be fine. Just carry on and keep an eye on it. If you really had to, you could go to the 175 grain ELDX. I don't think that would severely limit you because, although we talk about shooting all these extremely long distances, as you well know, if you're shooting a tar at 1,100 yards, you've got a hell of a march in front of you to go and recover that animal. So quite often, we're not in the field, we're not shooting it as far as we think we're going to on game. So if you needed to, you could switch over to that. But yeah, I think you'll be okay there. All right.
So straight under that is Cooper asking about your thoughts on chamber casting with Safe and the 300 Win mag. Can you see that question?
Yeah, okay. Well, you can't really do that because to determine the actual maximum case overall length or maximum case length, you actually need to measure from the bolt face. So you'd have to cast that with the bolt in there, cast all the way back to the bolt face. So you can't really do that. I think the problem is that people are just absolutely paranoid that the 300 Win mag won't shoot straight because the neck isn't long enough. That's what it comes down to. All you need to focus on is concentricity. If your ammo's concentric, it'll do the job. You can play with neck tension, you can experiment with that, but just as long as your ammo's concentric, that's what really, really counts. Now, if you wanted to, you could have someone like David Manson create a custom reamer in which you add 20 thou or even 40 thou to the neck and just allow that to grow. If you want to have a long neck 300 Win mag, do that. There's no need to be mucking around, with Safe and this sort of carry on. I hope that helps. It should be fairly straightforward.
Michael just wants to know if you'd ever consider adding shotgun slugs, rifle to smoothbore to the knowledge base, just because a lot of US hunters are limited.
Yeah, fair enough. We did shotgun slugs and small arms wound ballistics. but I haven't gone into it in a great amount of detail. Yeah, at some stage I would like to. We do have so much on our plates already with what we've got, and initially it was about getting that knowledge base done, and I'm still not quite finished with that first round. And by the time we finish this first round, we will be behind with a lot of our information. There's a lot of new loads that have come out, and then in the meantime we've also been doing other research projects. So we had that terror threat project and all this sort of carry on. So yeah, it does keep us busy, and I would like to do that, but it's just a matter of when we will be able to do that. Of course, some saboted loads, they're just using XTP projectiles and so forth, so you can interpolate that data. But as for solid slugs, that is a different thing. Rifle slugs as well. That's a different thing all over again. So maybe one day we will do a bit more on that. But if you want to see some pretty gory pictures, that's in that Small Arms book. But of course, that is a restricted item, semi-restricted item anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Mikhail wants to know if you could please try to explain your 90% rule that you mentioned in your books.
90% rule. All right, so that just means that it's just about being practical and looking at cartridge choice with a level of common sense, where if most of your hunting, for example, is for roe deer, and you're only going after the occasional red just once in a blue moon, then you might want to bring that cartridge choice more towards the roe and less towards having to be reliable for large animals. But I have explained that in detail in that book. But it's just, I think sometimes it's not so much there, but more the 338s where a guy thinks that if he gets a 338, I had a guy turn up the other day, he says, oh, there's a Ruger precision rifle, 338 Lapua Magnum on the wall at a gun store. He's really interested in it. And he said, oh, should be just such an awesome killer. It'll shoot flat to 2 mile. And he starts spouting off all this bullshit about its numbers and so forth. But of course, it's a heavy jacketed, almost double the thickness of a lesser projectile. And then you've got, it's not moving that fast either. It's quite a slouch. And so in that sense, there's an area where it works really well for hunting, and there's also for anti-material, light material and things like that. So there's an area where it works well there. But if you're hunting, let's say roe, well, chances are the bullet's going to zip through, it's not going to expand, and the animal's going to run off. So you really got to think, if you are hunting large animals all the time and that's all you were doing, yes, you could utilize a cartridge like that, and you could say to yourself, well, I know that it doesn't work that well on roe, but I'm not really hunting those sort of animals very often. But if I do, then I might aim in this manner, or I might use this particular bullet, SST, something like that, that's going to do that, or I might use it in that way. But it's about working with your strengths. But that's a very simple answer. Sorry, it's nice to have specific examples. And with the guys down south with who are chasing the tahr, those 300 Win mags, they do a very good job. And although the 300 Win mag might be a little bit much for smaller animals, at least, yeah, it's really working to the strengths of their situation, so that they know that their cartridge is always going to be reliable for them. So, you just work with the majority of your hunting, and then you find other ways to make things work for the times when you aren't hunting those animals. So whether that's by your shot placement or so forth, yeah. And same goes the other way. You can use a smaller cartridge on a very large animal, but you have genetics, so 308 cattle or something like that. You really just have to think those things through. Yeah.
Okay, we've got an opinion on red dot sights on hunting rifles for bush applications. So looking at a 30-06 bolt action and Marlin lever speed on target.
Yeah, of course you got no power, but if you're inside 25 yards, that's okay as long as it's a reliable unit, not some Chinese piece of shit, and as long as it can work if it is hit with rain. Then sure, why not? But what sometimes, it just depends on where you're hunting. What sometimes happens is you get a rifle set up that way, and then you do your bush hunting, but then you end up breaking out onto the tops, or you break out into river flats, and there's an opportunity to shoot out to various ranges in those situations. And you've got a rifle was it a 30-06?
Yeah.
Which has been severely handicapped by a red dot sight. An absolutely amazing cartridge. You don't really want to, handicap it unless you're specifically going to be hunting, at very close ranges all the time. So, just horses for courses, I suppose.
Okay, so I've got GDog with the 284 Winchester that had a good accurate load. 200 rounds and the accuracy's gone. Is that because of the barrel break-in?
Did he tell us what type of rifle it was?
Just 284 Winchester.
GDog, if you get a chance to re-comment, you might be able to let us know whether that was an F-class style of rifle or whether that's like an older lever action. But anyway, 200 rounds and the accuracy starts to go. Yeah, it could be that that you're getting a bit of throat wear and that sweet spot node has changed. Bartlett barrel on 75, Sarko 75. Okay, Bartlett. So Bartlett make a fairly good barrel, and it's a hunting. So as in like a long range hunting rifle. Okay, right. So with the 75, just do make sure it's bedded properly because you've got that difficult crucifix to work with. Because that could actually just start to show some opening up in that area there. So go over and do all of those checks, make sure it's properly bedded and properly relieved. And then if you do need to rework that load, it's hard to say because, without having the rifle in hand, it could be the brass has lost its temper and it's, the neck tension and so forth not so good or something like that. Or it could be just that the throat shifted forwards. With the 284, the throat will start to shift forwards at about 200 rounds. So, you might want to go in there and retake your cartridge overall lengths and find out what's actually going on there and then increase your powder charge and velocity to get back to where you were if it's lost a bit of power and just see how you're going. It's a hard one, sorry, because, without the rifle in hand, I can't tell for sure. Yeah. All right. I'm pretty sure I'm missing heaps of questions, sorry. But anyway, we're just doing our best that we can. Yeah.
Okay, just a quick question from James.
Yep.
Nathan, have you had any mid-ear blow-ups of 162 ELDMs at 7 mag velocities?
No, because I don't use a 1 1/8 twist barrel. And that's why. And I don't use a 1 1/8 1/2 either. Yeah. And I wrote about that in the book series. I think I've talked about that on the 7mm practical page as well. Yeah, it's just guys bring that in on themselves, and it just brings a whole heap of trouble. So stay away from those twist rates, and you'll avoid those problems.
Okay. What are your thoughts on bedding a Savage Accustock?
Okay, so with the Accustock, you've got very little cross-sectional area inside the stock, surface contact area, I should say. So normally, let's say this is the inside of a Remington stock, and then that's the Remington Action. Of course, it's round as well, and so the two sit, and you've got all that surface area, and that's how a Savage stock was as well. With the Accustock, you've got a bar like that, and then you've got the action sitting on that bar. So not a good idea. and then they try and lock that in place. So they've created a problem, and then they've supposedly created a fix for that problem, which they've introduced into the system. So if you want to bed that rifle, really you need to do a fill first, a pre-fill, like an epoxy like stabilizer fill, something like that, and then try and take up some of that airspace, because it's just it's a rectangle, and then you've got a round action sitting on a bar, single straight bar in a rectangle. So fill that area up and then commence bedding, or just bin the stock altogether and move on to something else. Yeah. So it can be done, can be bedded, but it is a bit of mucking around to do it. It's worth doing because you can imagine the harmonic distortion of just having that, the harmonic vibrations of just having the action sitting on that one piece of square bar stock. It's not that good. Yeah. Especially up in the 338, 300 Win Mag 338, where your recoil starting to get up a bit. Well, of course they are braked, but yeah.
Okay. Got a question from Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So Joseph has a rifle that shoots a little to the left at 20 to 30 metres, then straightens out between 50 and 250 metres, and then drifts right again.
It goes a little to the left.
Yeah.
At
20 to 30 metres.
Yeah.
Then straightens out between 50 and 250.
Yeah.
And then drifts right.
Just right. Those are special government-controlled bullets. They're doing it to just fuck with your head. No. Okay, so what we're talking about here is your changes in your field position, okay? So you need to put all this shit about, what do you call this thing again? Oh, bullets going to sleep and all that crap, right? Just put all that bullshit out of your head and actually focus on the human factor. So when you change your position or your resetting, what you'll find with the different targets and different positions is that they do affect the way that that rifle shoots and behaves. I went over that in the long range shooting book, and that's an evidence-based book. So you are required to test that and find the evidence for yourself. But what you're talking about there has a lot to do with your eye position and your cheek position on that stock. And as you're into different positions, then you're getting those changes there. So that's probably the way you're using your eye with that scope, maybe even the way that scope is focusing, parallax. So that's the major issue for you. So get that parallax sorted out by either adjusting the parallax if it's adjustable, or by correctly using that cheek and aligning that eye to the rifle. It can also be caused by an actual change in shooting position where the rifle is now resting on a different medium, where if you've gone from a bench to the ground or something like that, that will cause exactly that. But I think in your case, what we're talking about here is how your eye is lined up. Also, if you're wearing glasses, just be mindful that the slightest change in head position will cause that refraction, and so that can change your point of impact as well. So yeah, it's a bit of a tough one, but you've just got to get that point of reference just so you don't have to be all mushed up, but you don't want to have your head floating around either. You've just got to have a point of reference all the time, and you don't have to listen to all these idiots who like doing this bloody, they look like they're dry humping their own fucking rifles to death. You just want to get your cheek on there in a position which is repeatable. That's what really counts. And you'll work through it. So hopefully that helps you a little wee bit.
Okay. Fritz is asking, is there merit in going out to shoot only one shot?
Yes. Yeah, it's a good thing. Especially if you're doing it regularly, and because what happens is if you fire a shot and then, that was a miss, and boom, 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 away you go and you finally hit it. Yay, aren't I a fucking great hero, you know. And that's rubbish, of course, because that was the first shot that was the one that would have counted if you'd been out hunting. But if you take a first shot and you record it on video, you can actually just take note of all the details around that shot. You can talk to yourself before, write a note or talk into a video camera, fire that shot, and then go away, look at the results, and just look for errors there, and then you can come back another day and start again. It's hard for your confidence doing it that way, but it's the better path because you're not building up false confidence. And it's, you see that. So this is exactly where these tactical shoots, these gong shoots, they make the guys worse, not better in a lot of instances. So be mindful of all of that, because these guys, the way they purport these things and they show it all up like that, yeah, it's just the best thing. Well, sometimes it's not. They're listening for that sound, and when they hear that sound, the endorphins go and everything's good. But what you want to be doing is actually just focusing on your mistakes. And that's a group thing too. When you're in a group situation, you do feel pressured. Yeah, it's not the best sometimes. So if you want to actually be actively making mistakes so that you're learning from them, sometimes you want to be either on your own or just with one friend, Yeah, good question.
Have you had any experience with Boyd stocks?
Yeah, lots of experience with Boyd stocks. Yep, they're good, cheap stock, and they're good for learning how to bed. They're not going to solve all ills because they are unbedded. The chances of the Boyd stock fitting your rifle any better than your factory stock are, is 50-50. But yeah, they're good, nice, cheap stock to work with, and they can be quite a good option for certain situations. They'll never be, they won't always be as good as a full custom stock, like the likes of Clive Judd, his stock he's made here in New Zealand. That's just an exceptional stock design. But for a budget rifle stock, yeah, the Boyd's is really good. But it's just great for learning on as well, because you could hook into it with a Dremel. You can do all these things. You can make mistakes. And if you bugger it up and chip something, it doesn't really matter. You just sand it out and start again, and away you go again. And you'll still have a nice, smart-looking rifle, which is functional and does the trick. So, yeah, they're really good for that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay. Red Stag. Would you drill out small rifle primer flash holes to 2 millimeters?
No, I don't. I don't drill them out. We use a flash hole deburrer. We use the K&N tool. A lot of the tools we use for that finer elements of hand loading, we use K&N products. But no, not really. Yeah.
Okay.
Small rifle primer flash holes. Yeah, no.
Okay. So, and then just a quick query on 130 grain TSX and 3006.
Yeah, again, just so load it as fast as you can, and then don't push the ranges right out. But don't think that starting out with a lot of speed means you get a lot of speed down range. It doesn't work that way. They slow down really quick. So, a slow bullet with a high BC will, always end up faster than a light bullet with a low BC, which is launched at very high velocities. But yeah, 130 grain TSX driven 100 feet per second and used out to, a couple of 100 yards or so. Yeah, can be quite effective. Quite good on pigs and things like that as well. Solid little animals, it can work quite well. Yeah, it can be quite a bit of fun to work with. But in saying that, don't allow that to cause false confidence in the load, because you push it too far and then the whole thing turns to shit. So, yeah, just keep an eye on that.
Okay, so Rob, 308 Win, wants to know, out of all of the recent 6mm cartridges, and we all know which ones they are, or even the 243, on deer goat up to 300, 350 metres, which would you choose? All hand-loaded, no factory ammo, Tikka T3 rifle.
Oh, 243. Why the hell would you muck around with all the other stuff? The Creedmoor, I guess there is some merit in the Creedmoor because the lead angle, the throat geometry, has been designed to work well with the Hornady bullets. So that's why that one produces, or is, potentially can produce some good accuracy. So yeah, that there's some merit in that. But yeah, if it's just for a hunting rifle, then there's nothing wrong with the old 243, is there? So, and also there's just so many different projectile options now. It depends on what kind of projectile you're using. If you're just wanting to use like a Sierra 85 grain hollow point Game King, well, that'll work really well with that ticker geometry anyway, the T3 243 Winchester. So yeah, I can't really. Yeah, they're all much of a muchness, and they're all going. I mean, the way they kill, it's not going to make any difference from one cartridge to the next. The wounds are going to be much of a muchness. 300 to 350 meters is a long way for a 243, so it's really just getting an accurate rifle and getting your speed up, and as much speed as you can and as much accuracy as you can. Yeah, but yeah, I don't get so excited about the 6mm as I used to. I mean, we still have one here. I was just using it not that long ago. I do enjoy it, but I just don't push it too far, So that's where the real joy is with it. It's using it where its strengths are. If you start pushing them too far, and then you're getting into the narrower wounds, and it's starting to get a bit sort of hit and miss, well, it's no fun anymore. But I know a lot of guys, I don't know why they insist on trying to use the smallest cartridge for the largest animal, the longest range or whatever. I have some kind of small dick syndrome. I don't know what it's all about. But if you just keep it within those strength areas, which you've actually sort of listed there, it's just a lot more fun, So, yeah, but I can't see just whatever's the fastest of the bunch, and that will give you the right accuracy. And with the ticker, I mean, the ticker 243 actually does have a good chain design to begin with, so it is hard to improve on that. Yeah.
Okay, Nate, that's 9 o'clock.
Okay.
Ready to wrap it up?
Just about ready, I suppose. And do we have any last ones?
Well, there's one more.
Yeah.
And which I thought might be interesting to round it up with, and that is pros and cons of carbon wrapped barrels.
Pros and cons of carbon wrapped barrel. Well, the cons are that you trap heat in the barrel, and then when the heat can't escape, well, then it goes into the throat area there, and then as you fire successive shots, you start melting the throat of your rifle. So when these advertisers say that you can put your hand on the a barrel and you can't feel the heat, well, it doesn't mean that there's no heat. It just means that the heat can't escape from that barrel. So that heat's got to be somewhere, and what you're talking about there is some pretty severe heat in the bore. So if you are going to go with carbon wrap, you want to keep your round count quite low. But the issue is, if you take the likes of a ticker T3 rifle, that's already a very light barrel, yet it's capable of good accuracy. So why do you need to do anything else to that? There's no real, you could say, well, if we wrap that, then it would hold at zero for more shots. But then, if you wrap that, it's going to get hotter on the inside, and you're just going to cook it. So it's a tough one, because there are very good barrels due to the heat treatment they've been put through. Just care at that heat treatment stage, that actually do shoot quite well as lightweights. But I suppose if it is one way of looking at stiffening them, but I think you do have to use a lot of carbon wrap to actually get the stiffness that these guys rate. So there's a little bit of little bit of rubbish in that industry. Yeah, and I think for me, I've got Clive Judd in the background too, and he takes a lot of interest in carbon fibre because he uses it for his stocks, and that's been quite an eye opener for me as well, because he's a bit like me. He's a bit nutty when it comes to how far he takes his tests and his research, and there's quite a few things he's uncovered in there in doing that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that he's been able to produce a bloody tough stock as well. So yeah, interesting question, that one. But anyway, guys, I think that's just about it for this week. I'm getting hoarse. I'm not used to actually talking. I'm more used to researching and working, and I don't talk a hell of a lot these days, but hopefully over the weeks I'll get a little bit better at this, and yeah, we'll have some more good times. But thank you. I know there are a lot of people I didn't get to say hello to. I've just sort of seen them all coming in now. But anyway, thanks to all of you for tuning in and stopping by to say hello. Must go measure the size of my dick. Well done. Yeah. So until the next time, guys, take care, and good hunting.